Hello, we are doing the retest review for Unit 8. I'm going to go through the different problems with you, get my pen set up here. Okay, so number 1 through 4, write the name of the shapes. These are the different types of quadrilaterals. First, we have a parallelogram. Next, this is a rhombus. You can tell because the 4 sides are congruent, but they're not 90-degree angles. 3, we have a rectangle. You can tell because the sides are not congruent, but there are right angles. And then 4 is a square, because it has 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. So it is a rhombus with the congruent sides and a rectangle with the corners. The vertices, I should say. Alright, PQ is a midsegment. Because PQ is a midsegment, I know that Q is right in the middle of this line, which makes these congruent, and P is right in the middle of this line, which makes these congruent. So right away I can see that Y has to equal 16, and Z has to equal 20, because P and Q are in the middle, because that's the definition of a midsegment. The other part of midsegments are that a midsegment is half the length of the parallel line, the line that's parallel to it. So X is going to be half of 36. So 36 divided by 2, which is 18. Alright, next we have another midsegment. How do I know it's a midsegment? Because this is congruent to this, and this is congruent to that. So I know that this is in the middle. I also know that these are going to be parallel. So when I'm solving for x, I know that I need 2 5x's to equal one of these, because this midsegment is half of that. So I know that 5x plus another 5x is going to equal 8x plus 10. And now I can solve for x. So 10x equals 8x plus 10. Subtract 8x, 2x equals 10, divided by 2, then x equals 5. Next we need to solve for y. Well, I know that the midsegment and the base of the triangle are parallel lines, and if you remember from our angle relationships unit, 2 parallel lines cut by a transversal, which is this line. Right here we have y, and out here we have 40 degrees. Well, these are going to be corresponding angles, and if you remember from that unit, corresponding angles are always congruent, therefore y has to be 40 degrees. Alright, RHOM is a rhombus. If the measure of angle 7 is 61 degrees, then find the measure of angle 11, 6 in RHO. So, angle 11 is right here in the middle. It's a rhombus. Therefore, we know that the diagonals are perpendicular to each other. If they are perpendicular to each other, we know that it creates a 90-degree angle. So 11 is 90 degrees. I can also label all the other ones because they're all 90 degrees. I like to label my information as I'm working through it. We also need to know angle 6. So, because I labeled, I already know that angle 8 is 90 and angle 7 is 61. So I have 2 out of 3 in this triangle, which means I can solve for 6 by subtracting them from 180. So I do 180 minus 90 and 61. And angle 6 is 29 degrees. And I'm going to label that as well. Lastly, we're looking for RHO. So this one out here, RHO. I need this angle. Well, the other cool thing we know about rhombuses is that the diagonals bisect the angles. And when I bisect something, that means I'm cutting it in half. So the 2 resulting halves, or 5 and 6, are going to be congruent. So if 6 is 29 degrees, then 5 is 29 degrees. And to find the measurement of RHO, I just have to add those two together. So it'll be 29 plus another 29 equals 58 degrees. Alright, we got another rhombus over here. It says that OB, let's switch up the colors. OB is 2x plus 1. And BR, right here, is 3x minus 10. Solve for x and OR. Well, a rhombus is a parallelogram, and in our rules for parallelograms, we know that the diagonals bisect each other. So this one bisects that one, which means that these two halves are going to be congruent, because bisect means cut in half. So if I know that they're congruent, in order to solve for x, I can make my equation, which is simply 3x minus 10 equals 2x plus 1. Solve for x. Subtract 2x from both sides. X minus 10 equals 1. Add 10 to both sides, and x equals 11. Alright, next we need to find the length of OR. And the length of OR is both OB plus BR. And we know that OB and BR are congruent, so if I can find the length of one of those, I just know to add those together, or that it's the same, and then I just add them together. So I'm going to plug it in. So 2 times 11 plus 1, I just plugged it right into this OB. 2 times 11 is 22 plus 1. 23 is the length of OB, which means that 23 is the length of BR. So the length of from here to here, OR, is 23 plus another 23, which is 46. Alright, ABC is a square. The measure of angle 1, we need to find the measure of angle 1, angle 2, and angle 3. Well, first of all, because it's a square, we know all the properties are true about the square. And the first thing I notice is angle 3, and just like our previous problem up here, all of the middle angles are going to be right angles because the diagonals are perpendicular. So right away I know angle 3 is 90 degrees. The next thing I know about squares are that they have 90-degree vertices as well. And because it's a rhombus, the diagonals also bisect the angles. So I know that 10 and 1 have to be congruent. So if I just take 90 and divide it by 2, I know that the measure of angle 1 has to be 45 degrees. And again, we can do it on the other side as well. I know that this is 90 degrees. Therefore, 2 and 4 are just half of 90. So 90 divided by 2 is 45 degrees. Alright, Bugs is a square. If the measure of angle BUG right here is 3x plus 30, we need to find the value of x and the measurement of angle BZU. Well, first of all, BZU is in the middle. It's where the diagonals intersect each other. And I know that diagonals are perpendicular in a square, so therefore the measure of angle BZU, without having to do any calculations, is 90 degrees. Now we still need to figure out the value of x. Well, because this is a square, I also know that all of the corners are 90 degrees. So this corner is going to be 90 degrees, but it's also 3x plus 30, so I can set up my equation, do 3x plus 30 equals 90 degrees, and solve for x. So I subtract 30 from both sides. 3x equals 60. Divide by 3, and x equals 20. Alright, GHIJ is a rectangle. The measure of angle HGI right here is 20 degrees. Hey, look at that. It's also angle 1. So angle 1 is 20 degrees. Because this is a rectangle, I know that the diagonals are congruent. And rectangles are parallelograms. Therefore, I know that the diagonals bisect each other. So all 4 of these halves have to be congruent. Now, if you look right here, this triangle right here that I just created happens to be an isosceles triangle. And I know that the base angles of an isosceles triangle are congruent. So if angle 1 is 20, I know that this angle is 20 degrees. Now in order to solve for angle 2, I just subtract that from 180. So 180 minus 20 minus another 20 equals 140. The measure of angle 2 is 140 degrees. Now I'm already looking at angle 3, and I can see that angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary, or they add up to 180 degrees. So I can take 180, subtract angle 2 away from it, and I get that angle 3 is 40 degrees. Lastly, I need to figure out angle 4. And I know that it is a rectangle. Therefore, all 4 vertices are 90 degrees. So angle 4 has to add up to 90 degrees with this angle. So I can simply do 90 minus 20, and angle 4 has to be 70 degrees. Alright. One of the big pieces of this unit was knowing the properties of the 4 types of parallelograms. So first we're going to start with parallelograms, and it has 5 specific properties. The opposite sides are congruent. The opposite sides are also parallel. The opposite angles are congruent. The consecutive angles, or the ones next to each other, like G and H are consecutive, are supplementary, where they add up to 180 degrees. And lastly, we know that the diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so those are the 5 properties of parallelograms. Next, we have rectangles. And rectangles have 2 more properties along with all of these 5. So it has all 5 of these and then 2 additional properties. One of the additional properties is that the diagonals are congruent. And then the other one is we know that the 4 vertices are 90 degrees, or right angles. Okay. Next, we have rhombuses or rhombi. Rhombi also have all of the properties of a parallelogram, so all of those 5, plus, put it down here, 2 more. So this has 3 more, excuse me. Rhombuses have 3 more properties. We know that the diagonals are perpendicular. The diagonals bisect the angles. And lastly, Diagonals have 4 congruent sides. And then squares have all 10 of those.